What is an interested director transaction? Well, an interested director transaction is a transaction involving a director or an officer of a condo or co-op who has a substantial financial interest in a company or an entity that's considering doing business with the condo or co-op. So under the BCL, the Business Corporation Law, there are certain requirements that must be complied with if such a contract is allowed to proceed. Otherwise, it can be voided on that basis alone. So we often see this in the context of, say, a capital project, or a board is considering the services of a number of contract vendors, say, for example, an elevator upgrade or facade work, something like that, and one of the officers on the board happens to own an interest in one of the companies bidding on the project. So to avoid having that contract set aside, there are a couple of requirements that have to be complied with. So first, the interested director needs to recuse himself from any deliberations or vote on the subject. And second, must disclose all of the details of his involvement with the company, the material details of his interest in the company being considered. And then third, the contract or transaction, if they proceed with that company, needs to be approved by the unanimous vote of the uninterested directors or by a majority of all the other shareholders or unit owners. And if any of those conditions aren't met, of course, then the transaction can get set aside, which is a problem and a lot of work to undo. And so on top of that, there are some other requirements that the BCL imparts just to make sure that there is full transparency. One of those is that the board must submit a report every year to the shareholders and unit owners of any interested director transactions that took place during that year, including a number of details about the nature of the transaction. And second of all the board's members need to familiarize themselves with the letter of the law in section 713, which is the section at issue. So they need to get a copy and they need to read it and they need to know exactly what an interested director is. I should note that even if there aren't any interested director transactions during that year, it's important that the board send around a report anyway so that everybody knows that there weren't any. So, and that's basically it. And it can get kind of complicated depending on the factual circumstances of the nature of the relationship between the board member and the entity or person being considered for the contract. And so the most important thing is to dispel any notion of impropriety or favoritism. So obviously we recommend that the board consult their counsel and make sure that the transaction is being handled properly.